Now the red's on. Everything look good back there? Okay, class, we're hoping this works this time. If not, you can blame Mr. Nash because he came up and set it up, trying to do something different. But anyway, today is Monday the 28th. I'm gonna start doing that so when they do find the videos, what class was this? What day? This is American Thought, the 28th of September, 2020. Okay, quote 13 is behind me on the board. Notice over here before I read the quote, you're gonna turn your quotes in live and in person, or you're gonna send them to me on Wednesday. There's 13 of them. Wednesday's quote will not be part of it. In fact, we may not do a quote that day. We'll see. But anyway, keep that in mind. The quote, nice little motto to live by. The morning sunrise is God's way of saying one more time, go make a difference, touch a heart, encourage a mind, inspire a soul, and enjoy the day. Wouldn't that be nice if everything was perfect like that? But that's a great motto or goal to try to achieve. In all my craziness, I think of this one a lot. Not in these very words, but just to confess to you, I just hope I do make a difference in your life, silly or not. But I hated those professors that they knew your name, but that's all. They didn't know anything about my inner being. All right. You had to submit a memory check, and there were 6 questions. Hopefully everybody got those in on time. I think even when I will record them on the grade line, I even called it a quiz or a test, if I remember right. And what I've read so far is okay, because you can't hardly get anything wrong when you got a textbook and notes to go by. Okay, we're going to start chapter 5. And chapter 5 is one of the most important ones, in my opinion, because it sets the stage for the major change in American history in the Revolutionary War and what's going to happen out there. And what I devised here in my notes is I put some steps into it, and I have some a couple things I want to read to you, but not right at this moment. We'll get to them. Okay, I call these setting the stage for chapter 5. I also call them baby steps that lead to many, many things. The Revolutionary War, or the fight for independence from Britain, come in stages, and it includes a lot of things. It's not one major battle, not one major protest or riot, but many, many things. Okay, the date's important here because 1763, and I asked somebody once, when did we gain our independence? What year? Fire it out. You had it on the tip of your tongue. 1776. And historically, they always say we celebrate it July 4th. It really didn't happen on July 4th. It happened July 3rd at 11:58 p.m. Aha. Okay, here are some of the contributing baby steps to this. The first protests were basically vocal by a controlled group. and that group were the rich and the well-to-do, the ones that came from. It's time for a sip. I'm losing. They're the ones that kind of ran the colonies. They weren't always necessarily the governor or the minister of the colony, but they were the people that were kind of the clique that in charge group. Now, these people also were a lot of times appointed or came directly from Britain or represented England also. The common folk that had already been over here and comprised of most of the colony's makeup, they weren't too concerned. They were able to adjust and live until things slowly started changing. What I call the backbreaker, the first one that led to more common people being involved is when they started doing some little extra taxation. Remember a chapter or so ago we talked about the first taxation on ports, and it was called the Navigation Acts. And they really weren't enforced until other things started happening. But in order to get things going, the mother country decided, and their representatives over here in the colonies decided that we were going to add some other taxes to help pay for one particular thing. And that happened to be, after the 7 Years' War, Britain left, or the British left, approximately, your text says, 7,000 soldiers over here to guard them from the Indians and to keep, and actually the main purpose was to keep Americans from going west past the Appalachian Mountains. They wanted everybody to stay in this area from south to north. North was primarily, of course, French, but they one of the reasons they were going to protect that area and they were going to keep the French from moving in, but they didn't realize the Indians, that's where the name came from, French Indian, gathered forces to try to stop this. But this antagonized the common people because they started adding other taxes and other way of controlling. And it took a while, but this was the backbreaker, was taxation without representation. I'm sure you've heard that term. It gets bigger as time goes on, of course, and it becomes more of a predominant. Okay, one of the colonies, New Hampshire, has a famous town and a couple famous people. Bedford was one of the first areas and one of the first colonies that showed the first rioters or the first protesters of common people starting to get together. And it was very small. And then, of course, the governors, I'm going to call them ministers or governors of the colony, they didn't like people outnumbering them, so to speak. They saw that as, these people might gain too much power, and it won't be like we want. We won't have all the money and all the support from Britain. So with that happening, movements became larger, and they grew in popularity. Protesting little simple things actually became a way of life, and it grew. It grew like a cancer, a slow spreading type of cancer. Later on, it just balloons like aggressive type of cancer. You don't want either one. I've had some, so but not. Anyway, the common folks, once they got a little taste of this, saw this as a way they developed in just a short period of time, let's say 10 years, 1763 to 70s, 7, 8 years of these little mini protests and riots. But they saw, hey, this mother country stuff is not what we thought it was going to be. We don't want to be told what to do. We don't want to have these things done to us. So a guy by the name of Matthew Paton and John Paton, his son, they were ahead of New Hampshire, and if they wouldn't have done some of the things or said some of the things that they did, this might have blown over. But Matthew Paton and then his son John, who later does some things, and he dies at a very young age. But that particular leader, I'm not going to call him the leader, minister, governor of New Hampshire area, didn't do a very good job. And so the seeds were planted because, historically, that's probably a good thing that happened, because people go pretty slow at first, but once they get that seed planted into them, they take off with it. And you can see that in your history right now. Yes.
So, did they, Matthew and John, did they do it because they were representing Britain and were doing a poor job, or were they taking things that Britain was doing to cause people to go wrong?
Me wants to say both,
Okay.
but the true thing is it was them, especially Dad. I want the power, I want the money, and I want the pats on the back from the mother country so we can continue growing, becoming more wealthy, and my family and my family and my generation will prosper. It wasn't for the good reasons. Now, of course, all families have what we call the old term black sheep. Everybody in your family is really nice, but you always got one person that stands out and will try everybody or try anything. Well, his son, John, was kind of like that. And, excuse me, rebellious. And he didn't want that, and that really upset him too. So I hope that answered the question, and I think she was close enough. I hope. In the way I answered it, probably. Now, this is where the original idea of a militiaman started with the colony in New Hampshire, where a few men get together. Notice women are not involved. They can't make any decisions. They don't have any brains. They're just there to have kids and clean house. Sadly said. But a few men get together to not only start riots and rebellions, but to ward off things they don't like. And that might even be the redcoats themselves, the British themselves that were left behind. As you know as well as I do, they're staunch followers of everything, and then those ones that join in because it seems to be the winning way, or I got things maybe for me out of this. But this is the start of it. This is all the seeds of it. Now, through time here, another seed or step that occurs is the general economy of the 13 states and territories, because there's some unclaimed colonies. The growth, the standard of living is becoming, better. the opportunities to make money, to live, to prosper, the economy, all was changing. You still had the poor people and the rich people, but the poor wasn't, as poor as we would think it, where you have just outright. They even had benefits. And believe it or not, within each colony, every minister or governor, even though they were supposedly representing the mother country, didn't do that. Some of them were more generous and more helpful. Some of them kind of overlooked certain rules and regulations for the benefit of the community. And that was a good thing in that seed, and if each of you out there in front of me represented a colony, and I'm the mother country, once you get used to doing things your way, and then I only interfere a little bit now and then, just to make sure I'm still around, we could live with that. And once again, the next seed that really hits is I discover that you're not doing and taking care of your colony the way I want. You've got to realize there's a big time gap. Okay? In order for me to find out what his colony, what her colony, and what that colony and what that colony is doing, it was about a 3-month gap. And if you didn't want me as the monarch leader, the king, to find out, you're not going to tell me the truth all the way. You're going to hint. But by the time I get the information from that colony, it may not even be true. It may be just a disguise, so I won't take away some of their privileges or I won't attack them. So it was a game that they were playing, but those seeds were planted. And once I found out, back here as the king, I started implementing and sending somebody that was a little meaner or tougher. And one of those individuals wasn't a very nice person, Grenville, but you needed certain people to come from the mother country that were going to do what they were told and make sure things got done. And this is where the rioting took off. And it becomes, from protest to revolt, and then the final step is the revolution of actual doing of. Now, in our country today, right now, you can see there are people out there protesting the right way, probably in some cases, in a lot of cases, the right way for the right reason. But then some outside group gets a little more involved, and hey, we don't want a peaceful protest. We need to show some force here, and it might be just a little bit of turning garbage cans over, blocking streets and bridges. That's not too bad. Sit down protest. And then another group comes in, or more influence. Can you see the correlation? We're going to burn a building, or we're going to break windows. And then somebody over here said, I see some free TVs, And now I'm not really part of that protest of breaking the windows, but there's an opportunity. My family can have a free TV, and what I saw a couple times, clothes, food, beer, wine, but that leads to a stronger revolt of violence. So kind of see the steps, and then you get outside paid groups coming in to stir up the hornet's nest because it's starting to calm down a little bit. And then this relates. The way these protests in early America, They had a very well organized newspaper organization for the entire colonies. They get their communication and news quicker than back home to me, the king. Okay, so what's happening in today's world with the news? A lot of it, it's changed or not told truthfully. Got to use the same story I used the other day that didn't probably get recorded right. Is the young lady that got shot. Her ex-boyfriend fired first. Why did he fire? So the word now is, and I heard this yesterday, he fired first because somebody was breaking into the house and we didn't know who they were. Well, in this case, that they knew because the witnesses, not the police, the witnesses said they announced themselves before they broke in. And they were there for a different reason, but that was never said, and it hasn't been said. Same correlation back to early American history. See how you could change things if you have control of communications and newspapers and what you tell people. So that's why I wanted to make that point. And those are the baby steps that lead to big steps that lead to the 3 steps of protest, peaceful protest, to somewhat peaceful revolting of what's happening, to outright violence and revolutionary things. Make sense? I sure hope it does, because it does to me. Well, anyway, another baby step that was occurring is the colonies were getting less and less a chance to govern themselves. All right, why does my colony in Virginia, where I'm primarily a farming community raising tobacco, why do I have the same taxes as New Hampshire or New York? That's not fair because my crops are more valuable than your crops, and yet I get taxed the same. And that little game was played also. Now, I want to read on page 57 before we turn off the tainted news. All right. Mr. French. Walmart readers, who's got them? There they are. Okay, the first column towards the top. I'm going to read the last sentence up there first, and then I'm going to go back. Okay, the last sentence says, the revolution was in fact a complex series of events full of unexpected turns, extraordinary creativity, and great personal sacrifice. Up above, I want you to notice the date. No one consciously set out in 1763 to achieve independence. The bonds of loyalty that had cemented the British Empire dissolved slowly. And at several points, the British rulers and the American colonists could have compromised key things, could have talked it through. Their failure to do so was the result of thousands of desperate decisions, errors, and misunderstanding, and I'm going to add the word communication. Simple compromise, getting together, could have solved probably the issue. In America, as we know it, as we come through this time period, would have been different. Would we have ever broken away from the British control? Maybe not their influence, but maybe their control. It's a guess. Would have? I think it still would have happened, but it would have looked different. It would have, and now we're great friends with each other, but at that time there was great hatred. So, okay. One last key thing that was happening in Europe the British group called the Whigs. You need to know this. The political trust of the mother country with the colonies was crumbling, but the British Whigs, it's a political organization. Um, we basically have a two-party system here with a few other things in, Democrat, Republican, and you have the independents and you have the offshoots, right? Well, they did too, but the Whigs was the primary party that was old school for the British, and when things weren't going like they thought they should, they would report to the king. And the Whigs, they actually sent some over to New America to make sure things were getting back under control. Well, it didn't happen. And again, it was lack of communication and lying. Again, lying not only to them. So they went over to try to see it themselves, and some of them even converted, to be honest with you, to say, hey, this is much better than having the thumb of King Larry, the ruling king, and my sword and my controlling monarch telling you what to do. This is much better for me, and I'm going to have my family come over, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to. Anyway, where the communication gap again is going back, I could not communicate with this colony because of the time gap, because of the lying and the false reporting of information. So compromise, again, was out of the issue. It was either this or this. And when you do that, you can't understand each other. And that's a lesson for today. This still has to do with what we're talking about. I have hard to believe with my Christian background, the BLM movement, and it used to be Bureau of Land Management, by the way. No, it's true. But what they're trying to do and what they're really trying to do, are they there, to do the step 2 and 3 of the 3 steps? Not peaceful protest, but a little bit of this push and shove revolt leading to violent revolutionary movements. I'm trying to understand it from both sides, and it's really hard. Now, as younger people, generation, I'm sure you see it differently, or you think you see it differently in what you relate to, and a lot of times it's to your personal needs. I'm trying to think of something. Oh, I know one. Putting up the wall. Hispanics, how they felt about that. The Japanese Americans being sent to like concentration camps during wars, because even though they were born in America and they're American citizen, they were treated like foreigners. And one of my friend's family, his mom and dad, and they got freed just before Larry was his name too, was born. Otherwise, he would have been born in one of the camps, and that happened to him. But once you're in that camp, you were American anyway. But you weren't treated that way. Chinese, Japanese, Hispanics, black. It's all there. That's what I find hard to deal with what's happening and why it's happening now. And then what I told you earlier, that's what I see. The lack of compromise, a lack of communication, a lack of telling the truth. And I'm not necessarily pro-Trump. I'm supposed to preach both sides, but my choice is it this one or this one? Because that's all the choices I get. Or I do another choice, which to me that's not to vote. That's worse. okay? And can I see myself voting for this over this? And I say, well, when that time comes, we'll get rid of that person. And the way we have it set up, our president cannot have more than 2 terms. Even if he set out for 5 terms, he cannot go back and do it again. So why not just, when that time comes, hopefully somebody else will come in and will get the job done. I don't know. But there's my little speech on that. But it does have a lot to with this part of history and what's going on with you guys, what you see in front of you and what you probably feel. So there's more to come, as I say, but we're going to stop here for the video camera. And hopefully you picked up on some of these things. Don't forget, behind me, your quotes are due Wednesday. We'll continue talking about changing society in the actual steps that lead to real revolt. And there is violence. You know, there is deaths and killings. So in order for that to happen. Okay, we'll be turning that off. Don't forget, this is Monday the 28th. This was World Thought. No one said anything. American Thought class. That was a test. You could have got extra questions. All right, don't forget about those quotes because those are free points. All right, thank you guys. Have a good day.